Viewer discretion is advised.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the New to Wrestling podcast After Dark. Today there's going to be some interludes, some discussions, some things. We were going to, which we are, we're going to talk about the life of Pat Patterson based off of the documentary that we watched, which was My Way, The Life and Legacy of Pat Patterson on Peacock. However, we want to start the episode by discussing some more modern day accusations that are presented against Pat Patterson, though he has since passed in 2020. There's still a lot of things, as you guys know, there's so many things going on with Vince McMahon. Any upper management in WWE, there's a lot of things going on in terms of allegations, scandals, all types of things. And Pat Patterson being Vince McMahon's right-hand man for the majority of those years, some things have come to light. And so let's dive into that before we dive into the old Pat Patterson that we once knew.
Right. Just because we want to, we on this show in particular, After Dark, have made a point to say many things can be true at the same time.
Absolutely.
So while we're going to get into his accomplishments and his life as far as the wrestling business goes, there is, caveats to that. So
of course,
let's address them now, so that we can just kind of make sure that we're putting this in a frame of reference, that we are not just throwing flowers willy-nilly on, anybody's name. We are aware of what has been said.
Yeah, and it's not like we're aware and we're like, but we don't believe it. Like, we know. And we know just as much information as all of you guys. We are still also making our own opinions about it. We're just two people talking, making opinions, discussing.
Right.
And we hope that you join us, and let's get into it.
Right. Okay. So essentially this goes down in 1992 is essentially the kind of the crux of most of these allegations is when it begins. So there is a former ring boy or somebody who was they would like recruit from like local towns, whatever town they were in, to like come set up the ring. They'd like pay them a little bit of money, whatever. So this is being dubbed like the ring boy scandal. It is essentially, these accusations are leveled against Pat Patterson, Terry Garvin, and Mel Phillips, all wrestlers at this time. Well, Pat's probably in that weird transitional, like he's a more backstage role at this point. So essentially what is being leveled against these people is that they would use their position as wrestlers or like authority figures, whatever, to make advances towards these ring boys, some of which were underage. So Tom Cole is really the first one to speak up on it. And he ends up actually settling a lawsuit with the WWF, like outside of court. And then we learned later on that probably due to a lot of the stressors of a lot of this, he did not lead a very happy life. So he unfortunately committed suicide not that long ago, apparently, from what I've gathered. But he is quoted as saying that Pat Patterson would be speaking to you and he would like look at your crotch and lick his lips, make sexual gestures, as well as like put his hand on your ass and squeeze you, and like, so just a general abuse of power is what we're going for here. Right. So Terry, Mel, and Pat Patterson all leave the company during this time period. It is also coupled with the steroid trials in 1993, which is really essentially like a just the 1-2 punch to the WWF like brand. It really suffered in this time period because of all of this negative publicity. Again, as you should if you're allowing bad things to happen.
Correct.
So, yeah, so there's the Tom Cole situation and the ring boy like scandals. There's also various other kind of people who have come forth since with their own stories. Tom Hankins, who's like a former like wrestler jobber, essentially, from one of the local territories, said he asked Pat Patterson essentially like how he could like progress in the business. Pat Patterson essentially said like there's no way unless, and then invites him to his room.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, he turns down that advance, and then the next time that they are back in the territory that Tom Hankins is from, Pat Patterson kicks him out of the dressing room, essentially
Mm.
just putting the kibosh on his career. So yeah, so essentially, like, we just want to preface all of this, which is being like, while we are going to talk about his contributions in the wrestling world and kind of the um very real hardships of being a essentially openly gay wrestler in a time where being openly gay period is not a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to, we're going to highlight his contributions, because at the end of the day, wrestling is changed forever because of this person. So while we have to just frame it in this reference that lots of things can be true at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
that while he was contributing great things, it is also quite possible that he was partaking in very dubious behavior. Um,
Absolutely.
we take these things very seriously, but we do want
Absolutely.
to go into, just from an educational standpoint, the contributions of Pat Patterson.
We hope that everyone who has been affected by this is okay and is recovering, and whatever the truth is, let it be free. I
Mhm.
mean, but we can't, like you said, we can't deny that there are certain contributions that Pat Patterson made, especially in the gay community for wrestling. So that's what we're gonna talk about.
Cool.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So
We
from
love you
here, we're going
all.
to talk about the documentary on Peacock, My Way.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. So Pat Patterson was in the business for essentially 60 years, which is insane.
Mm-hmm.
From the rip, they let you know that, which is it's just a crazy long time to honestly be doing anything. He started wrestling in 1957/1958, and he said, I didn't know where I was going to go, but nothing was going to stop me. They talk about his early childhood. So he was born and raised in Montreal. And he was born under the name Pierre Clermont.
Mm-hmm.
So big Frenchies, I'm assuming, like,
Well,
because
yeah,
I
Montreal
know
is
is
just
big
speaks
French
French.
Canada. Yeah, big French Canada. Um, and he had an insanely large family. This
Yeah.
actually shocked me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so he was one of nine children, and then with his two parents, that's 11 people in one immediate family.
Mm-hmm.
And they lived in a two-bedroom apartment,
Right.
which is just
Crazy. It was really just like
how.
a two-room apartment, the way he
And that's what
described
he
it,
said.
but
He was
still.
like, there's no bathroom. There was a toilet. There was
Mm-hmm.
no shower. There was no running hot water. There was just two bedrooms and a kitchen. I literally don't even understand how they all could have slept in the same. I don't get it. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Mind blowing. So no shower, no hot water, one toilet, 11 people in a two room apartment, essentially.
Right.
They were like, their mom would send them to the public pool with a piece of soap every 2 weeks to wash up, and that was the only way they were able to wash. And she said, that little chip of soap, you better bring it back, because that's all we got. They were
Right.
very, very, very poor.
Right.
Um, when he was growing up, he was an altar boy. Also, he was an altar boy basically every single day, and he was like being in front of people and feeling like I was a part of something, and involved in the proceedings gave me that feeling of like, oh, I want to be in front of people as a career. Like,
Right.
I want to entertain people. Like, it gave me that buzz,
The itch.
the itch. Um and he talks about how there was wrestling kind of in his area, but he didn't know anything about it or what it was. And then this is so crazy to me, and like, what marketing genius this is.
And
His
really a sign of the times.
A sign of the times, for sure, but also, okay, so basically his mother bought a loaf of bread and they gave her wrestling tickets with the loaf of bread.
Right.
I'm just saying that would work on me.
No,
I love bread.
absolutely. Are you kidding
That would
me?
work on me
I'm buying this bread
immediately.
anyway. Like,
I'm and tickets come with it. I'll go.
no,
Whatever. I'll eat my bread in the second row. What do you
right.
mean?
100%. 100%.
So I was like, that's genius marketing. Everyone's eating bread. Get the tickets out there, get the word out there. But he went to the wrestling match. He said he had to walk 5 or 6 miles. But once he saw it, he was absolutely in love and he never missed a match. And he said, I had no money to get in, but I never missed a show. And so what he would do is he noticed that wrestlers, like the professional wrestlers, were like loading in from the parking lot and like carrying their bags in. And so he saw Killer Kowalski and walked
Who,
up to
fun
him.
fact, train Triple H. But continue.
Crazy. I was like, I know the name is familiar.
Yeah, they JR mentions it a lot. He's a big wrestler, trained Triple H.
Wow, love that. So he sees Killer Kowalski, walks up and he was like, and he barely speaks English. And he was like, I carry your bag. And Killer Kowalski's like, okay, fine, whatever. And like throws in the bag and he like just walks in with him. And
Right.
he's like, and that's how I would get in. He goes, I also used to get in. He goes, this is how badly I wanted to watch wrestling. I got a job as the concession kid who would like walk around selling hot dogs and french fries and la la la. And his boss would like be like, I don't understand, like you're not selling any hot dogs. And he'd be like, they're not buying, whatever. He goes, I was just sitting and watching the
You're right.
matches.
Fully. Fully,
Honestly,
fully, fully. I love
that
that. I
is
eat that up.
so funny. So funny. I love that. But then this also was like so funny to me. He's like, I was still in school and there was this kid in school whose father was a promoter. So I was like, that's my in, and I befriended him. That is
Fully.
psychotic. I just want to point out too, Pat Patterson's a Capricorn, and that is 100% something a Capricorn would do. 100p
Heard.
something a Capricorn would do. Like, I see your friendship as an advantage to me and a way to make, like, push myself forward. Like, let's be friends. And their friendship isn't necessarily inauthentic. It's just like there's a means to an end. Like,
Right.
beneficial on all fronts.
Mm-hmm.
But Pat, I guess, says to this kid is like, there's a place where we can train and wrestle, and like harangues this kid into wrestling, like, all for weeks and weeks and weeks. And they have a
Mm-hmm.
trainer and they get really good. And so Pat then goes to the promoter, that kid's father, and is like, hey, so your son and I have been training in wrestling for all this time. Like, you should book us. And the dad
Right.
is like, he flips out. He's like, what? You little bastard. Like, don't you dare bring my son to the ring. Like, blah, blah,
Right.
blah. And Pat's like, just give us a chance. Just give us a chance. And the dad says, like, I'll think about it. And he goes, and next thing I know, we're booked in a little town outside Montreal. And the guy says, goddamn kid, you did pretty good after his first match. And he goes, and after that, I was booked everywhere, which is crazy,
Yeah.
which is beyond. Like, did one match and then suddenly he's like, yep, he's the one. Get out there. So
That is
wild.
bonkers.
So he quits school and he just starts wrestling full time. He's making like $5 or $7 a match, which, oh, by the way, hold on. I looked up the conversion for this, like what $5 was in the year that he was doing it. So $5 in 1957 when he was wrestling was $55. But when I tell you what $50 is in that era, when he eventually starts really getting paid, you will be shocked by the difference of what a difference that money makes. So at the time he's being paid $5 or $7, and he realizes that if he's going to make it in wrestling and actually make it a career, he has to go to the United States. So that's what he does, basically. So at age 16, his family knows about his wrestling career, but they don't know that he is gay. And he is like, I already knew that I was gay. And he says, I was just a young guy, but I knew I wasn't attracted to girls. The first time I did anything with a guy, it felt so good to be caressed, to be held and squeezed. Like, it felt right to me.
Right.
And this broke my heart, I'm going to be honest. He said,
Mm.
I was so excited about this feeling that I literally ran home and woke up my parents at 1 o'clock in the morning to tell them that I was in love.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, and his mom's like, okay, that's cool. But like, you didn't have to wake us up at 1 o'clock in the morning. And he's like, no, you don't understand. Like, I get it now. Like, I'm in love with a guy. And his parents flip out. Like, his mom is sobbing. the dad is like, we don't want to clear in the house. You have to get out, like whatever. And the mom is like crying, like, no, 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 we can't kick him out. And then Pat, who is again 16, is like, nope, that's fine. I'll leave. Like, I don't want to cause problems here. Like, I'll just leave. Which
That's
is
crazy.
crazy.
Yeah, and leaves home at 16, which is
Yeah. And he said, I was 16 years old and my father told me, don't come knocking on the door. And I didn't,
yeah,
which is
that's
wild.
yeah,
And
and
very unfortunately, tale as old as time. Like this happened to
literally.
so many people. For
Mhm.
what? It's just whatever. I mean, we were talking about this before we started, and it's like it's the obvious thing where it's so hard to even fathom
Mhm.
how scared people were of
Right.
homosexuality, just even being in their it's just so mind-blowing, and it's like not my commentary to make, but it's just like it's obvious, but it's still so
Yeah.
insane.
It's yeah, I mean, and again, we are fortunate to live in the time we live in.
Yeah.
So it's like it just seems so crazy.
Hmm.
But that was just status quo. That
That was the
was
reality.
yeah, that was just the way it was. So that's and like the way he like describes it, where he was just like, my father told me like not to come back. He's like, so I didn't. And
Hmm.
like it is unfortunately just that reality is so real and so recurring and such a
Hmm.
fear for people today. So you know, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know. I can't imagine what that must have been like. And the thing that like really surprises me about Pat is he never like at 16 like never really hit it. Like hit it, but like if someone asked, he'd tell them.
Yeah, he
So
wasn't obvious about it, but he didn't hide it. Like he wasn't
right,
like, "Hey everyone, like I'm gay." But he was
right,
like, if you ask, he'd be like, "Yes."
right. And like the time period he lived in to be doing this is crazy because I'm telling you, I've read other books about people living in the same time period who were just like absolutely like persecuted. Like it's
Uh,
and like it baffles my brain. So I don't know.
yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, we could talk about that all day. It's just insane. But uh Pat, so he leaves at 16. He finds a suitcase in the garbage. He fills it with his worldly possessions. His sister gives him $20 and he goes to Boston on a bus. Um, he goes to Boston knowing barely any English, with barely any money, but this is like throughout the whole documentary, he's like, but I was having fun. No, like complete language barrier, no money, no idea what he's gonna do. And he's like, but it was so fun. I was doing what I loved. Like I was really just like living in the experience that I loved.
Mm-hmm.
So he ends up getting a wrestling gig and he gets $50 for his first match and he's like, "Oh my god, this is a lot of money," which in the equation, the what it would equate to today is $557
Heard, yeah.
versus what he was getting paid, which was $55.
Right.
Like that's the difference it makes, like literally hundreds of dollars,
Right, right, right.
which is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of money because when he said, "I
It's
got
literally
paid
a
50
hundred
and
times
uh, uh,
like so stupid. So
it's
stupid.
crazy." So that's thrilling. And
Mm-hmm.
he goes, but I realized I wasn't going to make it in the US as Pierre Clermont. Like, could you imagine, like, at Madison Square Garden, they're like, and entering the ring is Pierre, which honestly I kind of could, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Back
he
then though,
goes,
if you were like if you had like a foreign sounding name, like you were always going to be like the
the foreign
foreigner
guy.
heel. Yeah.
Yes. Okay,
And
okay,
he
okay.
wanted
That
to
makes sense.
Pat wanted to be a heel, but he wanted to be a heel for his personality, not just his name and like that he
That's
was
true.
like a French speaking guy, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point. So he goes, I always loved the first name Pat, which I find so funny. Um, love the first name Pat. He goes, and then what I did is I opened up the dictionary to the proper names or the proper nouns section, and I just was like, whatever the first thing I see is going to be my last name. And he looked at Patterson. What are
Right.
the chances of that? Pat Patterson.
Right. We
Because I
love an
used to joke,
alliteration.
love, and when I used to joke, like when I first heard of Pat Patterson, I'd be like, his parents, why would they do that to this boy?
They
But he
didn't.
chose this. He
Yeah.
also legally changed his name at one point. I think it was in like 2008. He like or
Hmm.
four maybe. He like legitimately legally changed his name to Pat Patterson. Um But so when he goes to, in the documentary, that you go to what his house used to be, which has been completely like redone, gentrified, like whatever, and it's like a beautiful brand new building, and he's like, it looks beautiful now, but when I lived here it was an absolute dump full of drug addicts, alcoholics, and
Right.
people, and he goes, and people in debt, which really aired me out. He goes, but we had so much fun because he was, I guess, just living with a bunch of young wrestlers like his own
Mm-hmm.
age, and he was just like thriving. Their apartment was $10 a month, or
A week.
yes, a week. Okay, I was gonna say, was it 10? Yes, $10 a week. And he goes, and English was hard, which we know this.
Mm-hmm.
But I picked it up here and there, and I was happy. Like I had a lot of fun there. And I will say, this was my like my reminder, like to take pictures, because all of these photos were amazing. Like
Yeah.
he had so many photos from when he was young that were
Mm-hmm.
just like beautiful to see, like him in the Buick, and him in the Buick, like him in the apartment, like cooking, like just
Right.
normal like BS things that like they're the little pieces that like make a life. And I know like we want to live in the moment and we don't want to be in our phones or whatever, but sometimes like, because Xavier and I are notorious for never taking pictures together,
We're so bad.
which is
So bad.
fine, like, because we're
Mm-hmm.
just in it, and that's great too. But like, I'm like, oh God, like, I have to at least take more pictures of my friends existing, because I just love them, and I want them
Mm-hmm.
to live like forever, which that's over dramatic, but whatever.
I get it. I get
I
it. I get it.
it just I was like, God, these pictures are amazing. So in the Boston apartment is also where he met Louis, which
Mm-hmm.
I will, and I don't know, I don't think I should be the person to point this out, but it is interesting to me in almost a sad way that he rarely ever refers to Louis more than anything than just his dear friend.
Yes, but that is also very common of
Right,
the
that's what I'm
times.
saying.
So
Yeah,
that is
it's
not
just,
like
that's not like a,
I don't think it's like a pointed intentional thing. I think it is a habit of having to hide for so long
right, that's
that
what I
it just
mean.
became a like uh habitual thing.
Yeah,
That is sad,
it's
yes.
it's very sad. Like, and again, it's not in like a pitying way. It's just like that
It's just
he
the
had to feel
realities of
that
being
way.
gay, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so he said his friends who he lived with knew like all these other gay guys who would go to the bars and who would be out. And so they decided to, introduce Pat to like all of their friends. And he goes, I'm meeting this guy and that guy. And then I saw Louis and I was like, holy shit. Oh my God. Like, I want to meet him one on one. And he says that to his friend, like, I want to meet that guy like one on one. Like, who is that? And he goes, I'll just make a call. And so he gets together. He said, Pat says, I had no money. And Louis arrived in a brand new 1962 Buick. He picks me up. We go have a drink. And I think, holy shit, it all
Mm-hmm.
started with Louis, which
Mm-hmm.
is so cute.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so then he goes, Louis and I were in love. There was no denying that. Like we felt so strongly for each other. But then there came a point when I had to leave. And this is wild to me because obviously, we didn't have cell phones then. Pat gets a letter in the mail
Mm-hmm.
from Mad Dog Vachon, who had seen him wrestle in Montreal, and says, "You're booked in Portland, Oregon. We'll see you there." And he's just like, "What? Like,
I
what?"
yeah. He's
But
like, I don't even know where Portland, Oregon is. Like
which
he's
was
like,
so the way he said that was so funny. He goes, I don't even know where Portland, Oregon is. Like, what do you mean? Like, and it's also like the farthest point on the country that like he's in Boston, you go
literally.
to Port, whatever. But just wild. So either way, he's like, guess that's where I gotta go. So he borrows money from Louis to go and says to him, like, I guess maybe I'll pay you back someday, like, see ya, and leaves. He goes, but like a month later, I missed him so much. And Louis literally like quits his job, leaves his family, leaves everything behind to come and join me in Portland, Oregon. And they have amazing pictures of the two of them also. And
Yeah.
I guess like Louis was sort of, I saw this online. It was like he was also sort of like a manager figure to him in some ways.
Yeah.
Um which you could tell from some of the photos, like Louis,
Mm-hmm.
like they're like
Is
posing
holding
with the
the
championship
title. Like,
belt.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And he said we were having a good time in Portland, beautiful city. We really loved it there, but then wrestlers started telling me I needed to go to San Francisco, like, and that is where I really made my name. The name Cow Palace
Mm-hmm.
is the best name for a venue I've ever heard in my life.
Isn't it
The
though?
Cow Palace?
Is
Are
amazing.
you for real? First of all,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that this is in San Francisco and not like Alameda, Texas, like
Right. Literally
like
the Cow
that is what
Palace.
the Cow Palace. I'm gonna start calling my apartment the Cow Palace
Uh,
because
sh-
that is there are some
Sugar.
heifers in here, girl.
Ah,
Um
screaming.
um
Screaming, screaming, screaming.
my roommate's gonna love that. Uh, but the Cow Palace is phenomenal name. But he literally goes, and I love how reverently it is like honored the Cow Palace because Pat
Yes.
says if you're the main event at the Cow Palace in San Francisco, you're a star.
Right.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so he called, I guess, like the booking or the booker at the Cow Palace at the time was a man named Roy Shire.
Yeah.
And he says, I called Roy Shire to get a starting date. And he says, I've heard some things about you. And Pat's like, okay, yeah, like what? And he goes, well, I heard you're different. And Pat's like, I hope I'm different than anybody else. And he goes, and I know what he's getting at. And this really gives the same energy that we were talking about with Goldust and Jerry, where it's like, no, no, say it. Go ahead.
No, yeah, yeah, yeah. Go
Say it.
ahead.
Go ahead. Um, so he goes, I knew what he was getting at, but I wasn't gonna give it to him. And he goes, you know what I mean? And he goes, I don't. What do you what? And he goes, well, I heard you're a queer. And Pat just goes, yes. And Roy goes, you dumb shit. You admit it? And he's like, hey, Pat's like, hey, I just wanted to work for you, but if it's really gonna, cause problems, like, don't you worry about it. And then he
Mhm.
laughs and goes, and I was there for 15 years.
Yeah. He's like, I was there for 15. He's like, don't worry about it. I won't embarrass you. Like, it's like,
Yeah, they're like,
I'm here to work. I don't know. You don't, this isn't relevant information. Like,
yeah, like I don't care. Like, what does this have to do with my job? Like, it has nothing to do with my job. So he was there 15 years. Um, so Hulk Hogan is in this episode, and he says Pat Patterson, because I guess, not I guess, but Pat enters as a tag team with Ray Stevens. And Hulk
correct.
Hogan says Pat Patterson and Ray Stevens tag team took it to another level for all tag teams. Like they really set a bar. They became a huge draw for the whole Bay Area. Um, oh, and he says when he's there, he's like, you see this place? It's huge. It's gigantic. And the walk from the ring back to the locker rooms was a long one. And I used to get beat up here a lot, not by wrestlers, but by the fans.
Yeah. For being a bad guy.
And yeah, and he says I always wanted to be a villain. I love this quote. He says if the heel is good, the match is good. If it takes a bad guy to make a good guy.
I was going to say, I also really like that quote because
I
it's
love
true
that.
in all storytelling.
Right.
In all
All
storytelling.
storytelling because the
There
villain
is,
is what they overcome. It's what makes the hero. That is
it
so
takes a bad guy to make a good guy.
true.
I love that. I love that. I love that. And to
And
understand that on like a storytelling like piece is
absolutely.
so ahead of his game.
Yep.
So ahead. So
And I even feel like this is relatable to even like when we talked about Yokozuna, like how so many people saw him as like such an amazing heel. Like Undertaker was like, I want to work with that guy. Like we will have amazing matches. And like even the villain versus the anti-hero, like that. But I don't know. I just to me, it's an all-encompassing statement that can be, like you said, applied to literally any type of storytelling whatsoever. Plays, like movies, books, wrestling, any art form you could apply this to, and it's true.
yeah.
Love. So Roman Reigns tells a story. He goes, Pat, and High Chief Peter Maivia were working at the Cow Palace, and Pat beat the shit out of Peter Maivia. And Pat says he was bleeding like a pig. Like I beat the crap out of him. Also, bleeding like a pig is always crazy.
Like a stuck
Um,
pig.
yeah, just wild. But Roman Reigns goes, I don't know if you guys know this, but the Bay Area is known to have a very large Polynesian community, like very large. And so basically what happens is Pat is like about to like leave the ring and he's like sees all these Samoans like in the front rows. He goes, and they're like, Afa and Sika, like
Sika.
big dudes, like 12
Mhm.
gigantic, and they're gonna kill me. They're looking daggers at me, they're gonna kill me. And I'm so nervous. And so basically what Peter Maivia does is he like jumps after him like after Pat and is like, no, let
Did
me
you
at him. Like, I'm gonna take it. What?
you know Sika is Roman's dad?
Yes.
Okay, just make sure.
Yes. Um, and he like jumps after him and is like, oh no, like let me at him, like la la la. So basically he almost like by using their fight,
Right.
like
Saved
kind of
him.
shields him as they leave,
Right.
sort of, which is so smart. And like he's like, I literally thought I was gonna die, like Pat. He's like, I literally thought I was gonna die. And when I got into the back, I collapsed on the floor and I was like, thank God we made it. But he swears that High Chief Peter Maivia saved his life,
Yeah.
which I believe. So then we get some words from Gene Okerlund, and he says, I love it anytime Gene Okerlund says anything, to be honest. But he says,
You're
how
not
could a
wrong.
guy stay fresh in the same place for 15 years? It's unheard of. But he would reinvent himself like all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So he was a heel. He was an amazing heel for a long time. Then he turns babyface, and he just continues his journey. And he says, after a while it started to bother me that no one in my family could share my fame. When my father said don't come knocking at this door, I didn't, and I have made it so far. It's been so long, and I just feel like bothered by the fact that they're not involved. And so what he does, he invites his parents to fly to San Francisco. They do. He goes to pick them at the airport, and his mom starts crying, and she says like, I've never sat in a Cadillac, because they've
Right.
never owned a car. Never owned a car. And he goes, and I take them to the Cow Palace. I get them seats. Louis is taking care of them. And they'd never seen me wrestle. They'd never seen me wrestle at this point. And when he comes out and he's got the title belt and everyone's all over him and they're screaming, they love him so much. He's like, my parents were shocked. They were crying, they were proud. It was like just this huge moment. I really finally gained their acceptance. And he
Mm-hmm.
goes, and when my father went home, he was singing a different tune. He was like, you got to look at what your brother's doing over there at the Cow Palace, girl. Like,
Right.
cutting it up. Like, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So
And like what
then,
a like I don't know, just like to make something of yourself and to still be like something's missing, that's
yeah,
tough.
very, very, yes. And very big of him. And honestly, very self aware to be like,
Yes.
because that it would make complete sense to hold that grudge, in my opinion. I'm all
Correct.
about like if you never talk to people who were shitty to you ever again, that's your business. It's not. I'm
Right.
sorry, I'm probably wrong, but I'm always like if you don't feel like it making amends would be good for you, then don't do it. Like I don't really care.
Yeah, I agree.
So the fact that he could acknowledge that he felt it was important to him to
Share
help
that. Yeah.
share that, help them understand like what he was doing, like even just to have a little glimmer of like understanding
Mm-hmm.
and know he needed that for himself is huge.
Right. I agree.
Huge. Because again, he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to
No.
do any of that.
Mm-mm.
So then we talked to Gerald Briscoe, I think who's more commonly known as Jerry Briscoe.
Yeah.
He becomes one of the Stooges later on, which I
Yes.
haven't met them in our other
No.
timeline yet, but
No. You got
um
a little bit.
got a little bit. But he said Pat was never open about his homosexuality, but it was no secret. There was always rumors. But Pat was such a great performer and a great person. You didn't care what his personal life was. Pat had so much respect. You like didn't want to, say anything or do anything to offend him because he had that level of respect from his peers.
Right.
Um, and it was funny. I guess one night at the Cow Palace, some guys in the front row called Stevens the F word.
Mm-hmm.
And he walked over. He goes, Pat says he walked over and whispered to me, if only they knew. Because I
Right.
guess Pat's like, because also the ref was gay and so was the ring announcer. Could you
Right.
imagine if they knew? And he like cracks up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so then I guess like there's all this. Pat's talking about like locker room talk, how like all the guys would be talking about like, oh, I was with this broad last night. I was with two broads last night. Like this is what we got into. And he goes, and I couldn't share that. Like
Mm-hmm.
I just felt like I couldn't. And he goes, and it's not that I was hiding. I just couldn't be me.
Right. And
And
that is a
I,
very thing. There is always a feeling of like, no, I don't wanna be like always, but there is a feeling of like you are other when you're in a like space like that,
of course,
where you just feel like, oh, like I can't contribute to this conversation. So you just like, and that brings on like a just kind of like an onus of like shame or like
Mm,
you just like you become very aware of that distance and your differences, like
mm,
especially in contexts where you're very much so outnumbered. um it's just something that like people don't think about, and the reality is like, oh, like um you come out, or people know about you, and there's always like there is an immediate like distance that's put between you and like
mm,
your peers in that regard, because
mm,
you're no longer viewed as the same. Like it just
mm,
doesn't. I don't know. Real or imagined, it is a reality of being queer.
mm,
Is that there is a disconnect from your peers, when you realize what you are, uh and realize you don't relate, like you cannot, like you
mm,
it just doesn't compute in your brain.
right.
And so a lot of times that is internalized as like oh, like it's I am the issue. um
Mm, mm,
Whereas it feels like Pat's just kind of like, he's like, because he was so ahead of his time as far as like just being very open, it feels
mm,
very like, oh, I they wouldn't want to hear it, so I'm not even gonna bother. Like I'm just gonna move
right.
on with my day.
Like,
Like,
I'm comfortable with what I'm doing, but I don't need to share.
right.
Like, yeah. And I think that, to your point, like, commiserating is such a natural part of making human connections.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, that I relate to that, and being able to like discuss things and verbalize, and like just
Mm-hmm.
that's why community is so important. And like the fact that you can't even like commiserate on that level, like of course you're going to feel like you're not having those conversations that connect you to people, and you don't
Mm-hmm.
feel comfortable to do that anyway because you don't know how it's going to be received. So you're kind of in this like weird, like you said, like this outlier position where it's like I don't know how to like, and
Break
I don't
in.
want to.
Right.
Right, right. Like I don't think what I'm doing is wrong, but I also don't want to like oust myself even more, so I'm just going to like coast.
Right.
So then we talked to Hillbilly Jim, which love to see Hillbilly Jim. He
Right.
looks so different, but
Mm-hmm.
like not in a bad way. Like he just looks like what is that guy's name? Who did the he looks like kind of like Phil Collins a little bit, like with the hair and
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
jewelry. Like
Mm-hmm.
either way. He says, "We love Pat Patterson. Pat Patterson was one of the boys, but we didn't talk about stuff like that. Those guys would stay in the closet as long as they could because of the ignorance and misunderstanding around the subject." So
Right.
again, you don't know who's okay with it, who's not. You don't know if you say like they're okay with it to an extent. Like you just don't know, especially in that time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But Pat talks about how much he loved that San Francisco was such a gay city. But he couldn't go to gay bars because the papers would be all over it. He was like, Louis could go to gay bars. He'd go to gay bars and like hang out, whatever, because no one knew who he was. But I couldn't because it would be in like the papers next day and it would be this controversy. It made me paranoid,
Mm-hmm.
like, about my career. And this is when he says, for years, being gay was chasing me, but also the business was chasing me. It was weird. It's always on your shoulder that you're gay, and you can't be free when you are trying to be a star or a big personality, and it sucks.
Yeah, I mean, look at Marlon Brando, James Dean, Hunters, something. There's a bunch of
Oh, yeah. Hunter S.
actors,
Thompson.
like a bunch of like writers, James Baldwin. Like there's a bunch of people, especially like in and around the time this is happening, um, that like if you want a career, a very public career, like you can't be that. So
Yeah.
you have to hide it, you have to lie, you have to do whatever you have to do, or you're not going to have a career in the chosen profession you want. And that's a very shitty reality to be in.
Yeah, because as if that's not hard enough. Like both things separately
Right.
are hard enough. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when he was like, he kind of did like this motion, and I was
Yeah.
like, that is like the body language is so
Yeah.
correct, where it's like
Mm-hmm.
fusing those two like chaotic entities, like trying to be gay and not trying to be, but being gay in a world that isn't accepting of it, and then also trying to be a star when it's so hard to like break through in that type of business. And then that happening at the same time is
Right.
insane for one person to feel in one body. That's
Mm-hmm.
beyond. Um, so that's crazy. Also, tiny interlude. When I was looking up things about Pat Patterson, we also learned that at the time he was also being kind of tracked by the FBI. This is so crazy. So basically, like after Lavender Scare, which is like the government's intense fear, it kind of went hand in hand with the Red Scare, like fear of communism.
Mm-hmm.
The Lavender Scare was like a very intense and acute fear of homosexuality, like infiltrating all aspects of life, like the gay agenda, like all that kind of
Stems
bullshit.
from this. Yes.
Yes. So basically the FBI was working on trying to get any known homosexuals who weren't American citizens deported.
Correct.
So because Pat was from Canada, they basically were following him. I think it was for like 10 years to try and get him deported. And so we were talking about this, how it's like when he said being gay was chasing me, they were not kidding. Like he was not
Yeah.
kidding. It's like the FBI is literally chasing me for being gay, and like my identity is being
Right.
tested, like all of this stuff. But it is, there was one point where he actually was served deportation orders and he just didn't do it. And then he was naturalized, I think, in like 2002 or 2004. Um, but literally the government was trying to like out him and deport him for being gay, which is crazy. Um, but either way, at 38 years old, after his illustrious career at the Cow Palace, he decides to try and break through in a different territory, because at the time it was still territories. And he goes to New York to see how he's going to do over the New York territories. So he meets Vince Sr., and Vince Sr.'s like, you're gonna make money, you're gonna be a main eventer, you're gonna be a star, don't worry about it, it's gonna be gravy, whatever. And Pat's like, that's great, and I really appreciate you having me here, but there's something I have to tell you about myself. And Vince goes, I already know everything and I don't give a shit. I'm in.
Right.
Love.
Mm-hmm.
Love.
I love
And
the
because even if Vince Senior and Junior, the only thing they see about you is money, in this case, that's fine. Because it's like, I don't care what you do as long as you're out there wrestling. I don't care what
right.
you do in your private life. Like,
Right.
do whatever.
I know.
He's
I
like,
know.
I'm
I was
I'm
gonna say
in.
I just love that response, and I love also like to just the thing is like I watched this documentary and had so many like great things to say about his personality, and then found out that everything else. I'm like, ah. But it's
I
just like
know.
to openly admit that to every employer along the way
Mm-hmm.
is shocking. Is absolutely shocking.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
what a like mind-blowing thing to like actually like think about. Like the government doesn't want gay people to exist, and he's out here telling every employer that he's ever worked for about him from the
Yep.
rip.
And never once is like, no, no,
Right.
no, you got the wrong guy. Like, and he, again, it's not like Vince Senior asked him, like, are
No.
you gay? He was like, I just have to tell you. He goes, I don't care.
No, no. He's like, no, no. I've heard it all. He's like, I don't give a shit. Like I do
Don't give a
not
shit.
care.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
Yeah, I love that. Again, Pat Patterson, like,
hmm
he was nothing if not like consistent, or like, I don't want to say consistent, but like steadfast in being like, I'm not hiding. I'm
hmm
just, here I
existing.
am.
Yeah.
Yes. Um, so his first match at Madison Square Garden was July 30th, 1979, and it was against Mr. Bob Backlund.
Yeah.
What a guy.
Who
And
we see later and actually looks pretty good, not gonna lie.
no,
Now,
actually, let's be honest.
n-
He did not look bad. I was actually shocked by this too. I'm glad you said it.
mhm.
We give credit where credit is due. So apparently, the match is an amazing success. Pat tears the house down. When he goes off stage, Vince Sr. hugs him and is like, that was so exciting. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That was amazing. And Vince Jr., Mr. Vince McMahon, says Pat, he met Pat when he came to wrestle for his father, and he was an extraordinary performer. He could make any wrestler look like $1 million. Um, Bob Backlund says he's the only person to have ever wrestled a champion in Madison Square Garden 4 times in a row. You have to be really interesting to make that match something people want to come back for over and over and over again.
Yeah,
And that's
it's crazy,
true.
especially because he never wins.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same result all 4 times. So to advertise what is essentially the same match in the same venue over and over and over again, you have to be so good at what you do. You have to, each match has to stand on its own, has to be varied enough that you don't compare the two. They has to you have to raise the bar every time in case the person that is seeing it this time also saw the last one. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is in wrestling, so hard to do. So hard to do. They very, very rarely put, put on the same match over and over and over again like that.
Yeah, really crazy. Um, so then, because he's so successful in the ring, he becomes the very first Intercontinental Champion a few months later. Jerry Briscoe says he set the bar for how the Intercontinental Champion should perform. You had to be the guy that put in the time. You had to be the guy that had the best match of the night. You had to work. And this helped me understand when we talk about our regular show
The
about
workhorse champion.
the work, because I only know that through the context of you, which is a beautiful context to
Right,
live
but
in.
yeah.
But now I understand. Like
Mm-hmm.
I really get the origins of like it's the Gerald Briscoe says it's the Pat Patterson way
Mm-hmm.
of like you are working to maintain your title. That's your title and you prove it night after night.
Right.
And so now I get why when we're in this mush era with the Intercontinental title, like where we're
Mm-hmm.
at in the other show, I'm like, okay, well now I get it and now it's annoying. Like
Yeah.
like it makes sense to me.
Because it's like, oh, that's what it's supposed to be. Got it.
Right. And it has been historically. And now we're just kind of like
Yeah.
dropping it. But on April 21st, 1981, he has a no holds barred, one of the very first no holds barred matches against Sergeant Slaughter, which again, I said this last week for Yokozuna's episode, one of the best names ever. Sergeant
Sergeant
Slaughter is
Slaughter is great.
crazy.
I love
Is
that. I love it
amazing.
so much.
So good. And Gene Okerlund says it was kind of the genesis of hardcore street fights because there was blood, there was gore, there was like who's gonna make it, who's gonna be
Mm-hmm.
standing at the end. Like there was no ref. Like they had to literally, I think it was like they literally had to wave a white flag and be like, I surrender.
Mm-hmm.
Like, which is so, I love the drama.
Right.
Like you literally, like, cause your arm might be dead tired, but if you don't want to die, you have to wave that white flag. You better get up there. Like
Mm-hmm,
that's
mm-hmm,
so
mm-hmm.
crazy.
They also do like some like variations on that match, or something like similar, but they'll do like you'll have like a spokesperson who has like your towel, and like they decide like when to literally throw in the towel. So I've
Wait, I
seen
love
those
that.
matches before. Those are pretty interesting.
You
But
could
yeah,
never be that person for me. You would let me die. You'd be like, she can take it. And
she
I'd
can
be like
take it.
literally bleeding out on the floor.
I'm the worst.
But like only because you believe in me and think I got that much dog in me, that much scrap in the fight. And like I just be like, please throw it, please throw it. And I
No,
would throw it like instantaneously.
and I'd
I'd
be
be like, oh
so
my
pissed.
God.
And I'd be so mad.
And you'd be so mad and we never talk again. So let's agree to pick somebody.
Yes.
My God. But yeah, Kevin Nash says that match was Pat Patterson to a T. It was he still had a good night, but he elevated the heel.
Yeah.
So he just always elevated whoever he was in the ring with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Pat Patterson does end up winning that fight. So Pat says he never dreamed he would wrestle as a main event at MSG, and he got to do so every night, and it's something that he is incredibly proud of. It's one of his biggest accomplishments, and I get that because
Yeah.
I can't imagine even just going as a spectator to Madison Square Garden is something to behold. So to be a main eventer wrestling at Madison Square Garden, I cannot
Like
imagine the
night in,
thrill.
night out, like another day main event. Another day
That
main event.
another
Crazy.
bus, club, another club,
Nightclub.
plane. And he's like, MSG, main event, bus, club.
So
um,
ridiculous.
but then I don't know how this transition happened. I guess because he just was getting older, but
Mm-hmm.
he started transitioning into being an announcer alongside Vince. But his English was not very good. Bruce Pritchard said he was hard to understand at times. He would like drop S's randomly or like say things
Mm-hmm.
backwards or whatever. And I think at one point, Pat's like, and Vince used to like piss me off because he would just laugh. Like I would like make a mistake and make a fool of myself, and Vince would be like, ha ha ha, anyway.
Right.
And I get that. Like and
Mm-hmm.
Vince, so sorry, has like a very punchable looking face.
Yes.
So that would be hard for me to restrain myself. But
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Vince says it was difficult for Pat, but Pat would do anything you asked him to do and give it his all. Um, Pat says, I didn't decide to stop wrestling or to stop commentary, but Vince wanted me in the office. I was on the road and I realized talking to Vince, I said, it seems to me that you are getting behind on the bookings. And Vince was like, well, what do you think? Like, I'm doing this all alone. Like, what do you want from me? Blah, blah, blah. And I guess Pat offers his help, is like, look, if you want help, like, I'm free this weekend. I'll help you out, blah, blah, blah. And Vince is like, we went to the work on Saturday. I said, can you come back again tomorrow? And then essentially Pat never left the office. And
Yeah.
then we were just in there.
Mm-hmm.
And he makes Pat senior vice president. And
Right.
Pat is literally like, I don't know what that means.
I love that. It just cracks me up because honestly, if it's just how it works. It's just how it works in companies. Like it's
Like-
just true. Like, oh, I like you. You're my friend.
Yep.
That's all
Your
it is.
senior vice president. Pat,
We're all out here writing resumes like a bunch of chumps.
I swear to God. Listen, put me
It's
down
all
as a reference,
no,
baby.
baby. It's who you know. Like,
just so all of you know, you can put down either one of us as an email reference, even if we've never met you, and we will send you the most glowing recommendation, just so you know.
Absolutely. I've got it on deck. I got mad practice doing them too.
Yeah, like I don't want to give out my personal phone number, but if you want to use our email address or like whatever, like
I gotcha.
We'll send you one.
Mm-hmm.
So Shawn Michaels says it was him and Vince, they wrote the shows. Like they were the masterminds behind all of the storylines. Bruce Pritchard says they created all the storylines, all the live shows, and they worked with all of the talent and all of the producers. Like they did everything.
Mm-hmm.
They were working 7 days a week, all the time. Like Pat tells a story about how it was like Labor Day, and Vince is like trying to call people and no one's answering. And he's like, "Why isn't anyone answering the phone?" And Pat's like, "I mean, it's a holiday." And Vince is like, "I hate holidays."
Yeah,
and I believe that.
No, yeah,
it is. That no,
it is. You can talk about like anybody that talks about like Vince's like work at the man does not like vacations. He doesn't like breaks. He is like the type of person that sleeps like 3 hours a night, like wakes up, goes to the gym, goes to work, goes to the gym again in the middle of the day, like goes back to work, goes to the gym again at night. Like he's crazy. But you have to be. Like I think if you're going to build something on the scale that he was envisioning and what it ends up being, like you're nuts. Like you have to love working more than most anything else.
Yeah.
So
I think that he the most chaotic and unstoppable duo ever would be Vince McMahon and Kris Jenner.
Yo.
I think the world would explode.
I think
two different demons meeting who never stop working.
Yeah.
Never stop manipulating the people around them to make them money.
Ceaseless. I don't know.
Crazy. Hillbilly Jim, and which also I want to point this out, Hillbilly Jim is the only person in any interview I've ever seen that never uses his real name. Like Hillbilly Jim is his name. Like, because you know when it pops up like with their little tag,
it'll be like former wrestler, blah blah blah.
Former wrestler Hillbilly Jim. His is my name is Hillbilly Jim. Like it's not Shawn Michaels. Like he
Sean
never
Hickenbottom.
uses, yeah, like he never. It's literally like my name is Hillbilly Jim. I love that. But he says Pat was super instrumental in us becoming the monster that we did as far as entertainment goes. Vin says he came up with storylines I never would have thought about creatively. It was like epic. And Scott Hall, better known as Razor Ramon, says Pat Patterson would put Vince in his place. Like he wasn't being disrespectful. He was just doing his job. Like they would be in meetings and Vince would say something and everyone who imitates Pat goes like, no, that's horrible. Don't do that. Like he's not just like, I actually don't think that would work. He's like, oh, no.
Like, and I love that though, because like,
I love that.
Because
I need people like that in my life.
No, and people like Vince need people like that in their life.
Right. And I think Scott says that he's like, when you're that powerful and you have a bunch of yes men around you, like, yes, of course. Yes. Oh, sycophants. Good word. And Pat was like, ew, brother, He was like,
brother, no. That's hilarious.
Like, could not be more fitting. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And literally the motion of like waving his hand, being like, oh God, no, even get that idea
Mm-hmm.
away from me. Boo. I
I
just
love
love
that.
that. And you need people like that. But Bruce says, Pat looked at it like, I'm sitting in the crowd. What do I want to see? What is going to make this exciting?
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, even the little clips of just they have like little interludes of Pat, in the time that they shot the documentary and
Mm-hmm.
just going to wrestling matches. And I really feel like, I mean, it's no debate. He loved wrestling so much. He was like, if I go hide in the crowd and watch something, even though he was involved in the storyline, he's like, I'm like goosebumps
He
crying.
used to go out and watch he would go out for the first like the opening of every show. Like he wanted to feel like what it is like to be an audience member, like seeing the show for the first time.
And I
Um,
feel like that connection is important to
very much so.
maintain. Like
Very much
even when
so.
you're in upper management, like it's important to like
Well,
still
yeah.
be
I
in
mean,
the
like, who are
room.
you making the product for? Like, who is this
Right.
for? Like, there has to be a reason. Like, you can't just like throw content out into the world for no reason. Like, there has to be like, oh, who am I making this for? Like,
It's so true.
mhm.
So obviously we know this, but Pat came up with the idea for the Royal Rumble. I mean,
Yes.
genius.
Mm-hmm.
So it was
My
based on
favorite. I will
I know,
forever
and
be indebted to Pat Patterson for the Royal Rumble.
I
I live for that shit. I
the
live for it.
drama really is so crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It really is so crazy. I so it was based off the Battle Royale, which is like 20 people start at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure all of you guys know what the Royal Rumble is, but basically it's the same amount of people. They just enter at 2-minute increments. So it starts with two people,
It's
and then
30
every
people.
two, oh, 30 people. My bad. That's why you're here. So 30 people, but one person enters every 2 minutes,
Correct.
which is adds some real chaos. And it's just great because you never know who's coming in. It could be anybody. 30
Mm-hmm.
people is a lot of variables. Like it's
Yes. And they
great.
always, and it's become like a tradition for there to be surprise entrance. Like it is,
Thank
there is
God.
always like a certain number of spots that are just like either for like past people, debuting people. Like they make it a point um to build in surprises in the show.
Love.
So
Yeah, I can't wait to watch the Royal Rumble again.
this
Like
next one's gonna be good.
I really can't wait because now I just feel like I have a better grasp
You just
on
have so much more
things.
context. Yeah.
So much more context, like the storylines, the who, the whats, the whys. So that'll be thrilling. But Vince doesn't think it's gonna work. When Pat presents him the idea, he's like, "That's not gonna work." And Pat
Mhm.
goes, "It's gonna work." Like
Yeah.
literally, just like that. He goes, "It's gonna work."
Right.
And they pitched the idea to Dick Ebersol, who's a TV producer. And Vince literally goes, "Yeah, tell him your stupid idea." And Pat's like, first of all, it's not stupid.
True,
Um,
like a real queen. Anyway,
real queen. um,
sorry,
First of all,
not
don't make
stupid.
me get to the second goal.
Right, one
Don't
hundred
make me
percent.
get to the second, let alone the third. But
So good.
but obviously it goes over very well. Dick Ebersol is extremely hype. He's like, let's do it. Sounds awesome.
Hmm.
Run it. Jerry Briscoe says everybody had their doubts, and then we had the first one, and of course Pat was in charge putting it together, and he had worked on it for months. It was his baby, like,
Hmm.
which they also had that crazy book. That book, which seems like hieroglyphics, like
Right. It is
type
like
of shit.
when they were talking about like them booking the match, he's like they were literally using a book, which is nuts.
And
But
someone still has the book,
uh-huh.
which is crazy. And it's not even a calendar. It's like cubes with names and events, and they like cross reference. I have no idea. It was
Hmm. It was
beyond
the
me. It was
ramblings of Mad Men for sure.
the ramblings of Matt. Only the two of them could ever decipher it. The codex. It's
Right,
crazy.
100%.
Um, so January 24th, 1988 is the very first Royal Rumble. It is the highest cable network number in history at the time.
Right.
Crazy. Um, and everyone's like, everybody loves the Royal Rumble. It's
Everybody,
amazing. It's
everybody.
it's the best.
He's
And
like the boys love it, the fans love it, like everybody loves the Royal
I
Rumble.
can imagine being a wrestler and absolutely loving that. That seems like a good freaking time to
Well,
me.
it's because so out of the ordinary of like your day-to-day like matches.
Mm-hmm.
It's complex in nature, which just makes it more interesting. And you're actively like providing like shock value to fans like as it's happening. So like it
Mm-hmm.
just is fun. Like the whole thing is just fun. And it now has become such a tradition. It is like it is the start to WrestleMania season every year. Like
Yep.
it is
The
like the
welcome to the
beginning
road
of
to
the most
WrestleMania.
exciting time of the wrestling calendar is the Royal Rumble to WrestleMania.
Work.
So
I have a
it
question for
yeah,
you. This is just an opinion.
sure.
So well, first of all, whoever wins the Royal Rumble, they get a title shot, or that's just circumstantial?
Now it becomes they get a title shot. There have been a few exceptions to that where the title itself has been on the line. Um
Oh.
yes. So
Ooh, that's
yes.
exciting.
So yeah, there have been a few circumstances where that's been the case, but typically the winner of that gets to be the main event at WrestleMania is the
Oh, okay. So that was going to be my question was how prestigious is it to win the Royal Rumble?
oh, it's huge.
It's huge, right?
It is huge. It becomes one of those like accolades that like gets mentioned with your name like when they start like listing all the cool shit you did.
Oh, like the
they'll
winner of the 2023 Royal
they'll
Rumble,
be like
the
Cody
okay.
Rhodes, the winner of the like two-time Royal Rumble winner. Like Shawn Michaels is a two-time Royal Rumble winner. Like it's just like a feather in your cap, you know.
Work.
Because
Okay.
it's not, first of all, like it's not a easy match generally. One, because they are
Right.
typically men 30 people, 2 minutes apart, it's an hour long. The match itself is an
Mm.
hour long.
Right, 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 right.
So if you are in those like early numbers, you're really earning that one. You're earning your check that night.
Yeah, like Stone Cold, the one that we watched so
Right,
far was Stone Cold in the Royal Rumble, and he was
right.
in there for 45 minutes, which is
And in
crazy.
like 2 years prior in 90, no, whatever, 95, Sean went bell to bell, started from the beginning and finished.
That
So,
guy.
um, so yeah, so we should, yeah, we'll talk. We'll talk.
Okay. Um, but Pat Patterson says every time I watch the Royal Rumble, I'm in heaven because it's just cool to like have. I mean, that's crazy to have your
Mhm.
idea. And for all intents and purposes, it's kind of a simple idea. Like a concept is very simple. Staggered
Right.
entrance. Like it's the
Usually the
concept
best
itself is
ideas are simple.
are very simple. Some like what is that? It's the saying is keep it simple, stupid.
Right.
Like keep it simple, stupid. Like it
Hmm.
and to have that and have it have such an impact and like such a dramatic like
Hmm.
it's just so good and to
There's
have it persevere is
and it's
crazy.
also that, and I watched a Mark Henry was on a podcast and he was asked about this like one move sequence that like is attributed like to him that a lot of the bigger wrestlers now do because they
Mm,
saw Mark Henry do it. And he got like a little bit of like emotional about it. And he's like in wrestling, it is so hard to create something that hasn't been done before. Um,
that's true. That's very
so
true.
he's like that's the thing, like that's like the running joke in wrestling. It's like, oh, like everything in wrestling has already been there, done that. Has somebody has seen it or done it already. So when you can really like make a contribution and it is original and it is yours, like that
And
is
it's lasting.
that's forever. So and Pat's got a few of those
Yeah.
in his, you know.
And this one, even if this was just the only one,
Right,
like,
is huge. Is
okay,
huge.
like, all right,
If the Royal Rumble is his magnum opus, like that is
well done.
well done. What a career.
Like,
Like,
okay, Amadeus, like, that's
and the thing is like
crazy.
that is like creating the Royal Rumble itself is enough of a like contribution to wrestling to put you in the Hall of Fame. This is after a like ridiculously long career.
Career,
Like, so
wild.
yeah.
Um, so, oh, also, I really quickly want to mention, I just also love the name, like, from Battle Royale, they made it the Royal Rumble, like, how they
Hmm.
do those little things with the words, like, love that
Hmm.
marketing meeting, thank you. Um, But then Pat Patterson starts scouting talent. So, and gets very involved in that aspect. So Shawn Michaels says, I'm sure as I sure as hell wouldn't have gotten my break without him, and not to acknowledge that would be criminal. He made me better creatively. He challenged me in ways that I didn't even know he was challenging me. Bret Hart shares a similar sentiment. We wouldn't be talking right now if it weren't for Pat Patterson. He was a huge part of all of our success.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And
and
you're
it,
and if you're looking at the wrestlers that are like speaking, like they're the workhorse wrestlers.
uh,
They're
amen.
they
That's
like
so true.
mm-hmm. I was like, those were they Brett and Sean were excellent intercontinental champions before they became WWF champions. Yeah.
That is such a good point. I'm so glad you said that.
Mm-hmm. And
Um,
when they talks about like this next piece, like the their match,
mhm.
that is the workhorse match. Like that is like you don't
The
get
Iron,
more
yeah,
workhorse than that.
yeah, the Iron Man match
Mm-hmm. Which we
for
need to
at
watch.
WrestleMania. Yes, I really want to watch this actually. Obviously I know the outcome, but I still want to watch it. So it's WrestleMania 12, Bret Hart and Shawn in the Iron Man match. It was all Pat's idea, allegedly. At least that's what Bret and Shawn say.
Yeah,
And
he pushed for it to be an Iron Man
an
match
Iron
because
Man
he knew that
match.
they could do it. Like they had
Yes.
though if any two wrestlers were going to be able to like sustain a story for that long, it was going to be these two.
And it's so true. It's
Oh,
so
it is
true.
so true.
I
It is
mean,
amazing.
we've said that all the time about both of them. Like Shawn
Hmm.
Michaels, he just keeps going and going and going and
And it's
going.
Sean's career is not dissimilar to Pat's. He is now in creative.
Oh yeah.
Hmm.
Girl, I love all these connections we're
Hmm.
forging. Um, but Pat had said, like, I loved them so much. They entertain me, and I'm a wrestler. And if they entertain me, that's big. I'm telling you.
Yeah,
So, I mean, obviously, it was crazy. It was amazing. It was like just beyond one of the best matches for both of their careers.
it's like one of my favorite matches of all time. Like
Yeah, I can't
it is
wait
one
to watch
I
it.
rewatch. You know what? Next week's After Dark, we're gonna watch it.
Yes. Okay, great. I love when you do this. I love when you do this, and then it's on the episode, so we have to hold you accountable.
Right. So, all right, yeah, we'll watch the Iron match. It's an hour. If you want to hear us talk about one match for an hour, let's do it. Let's go.
Period. And you know you do. Don't even start. Um, so wrestler Edge says to him it was all about the work you could do in the ring. Before him, a guy like Shawn Michaels and a guy like Bret Hart are not seen as world champions because we know it was the era of the big man at the
Hmm.
time. But like you said, Pat was interested in the workhorses who could get in the ring and actually make some magic happen. And not that the big men can't do it, but it's just a different type of work. Stone Cold said he was one of the greatest minds behind the scenes in the business. And Pat says, and I thought this was great too. He says, to me, all I did and I loved it was to help the talent with their character.
Yeah.
So he was like, and they have these like amazing videos of him wrestling with the guys like behind the scenes, like training them.
Hmm.
And it's just cool to see. And again, it's like an obvious thing that must happen, but like wrestling as your character, like what your character would actually do
Right.
versus like what a move, like, oh, maybe I'll like hit him. And it's like, no, but your character is like shadier than that. Maybe he does this. Like
Right.
to
The
actually do
psychology of it is
yes, to develop the style of your wrestling based off your character and it creates the brand. And again, that's like it seems obvious, but like to actually be trained in that mindset to like really get
it's
into
like one of those things that seems obvious but is difficult to practice and do if you don't have that
yes,
kind of like guidance or like mind to put those like two and two together like that. It's not an easy thing to just like do, you know what I mean?
right.
Like if you don't have a like, and this is the same in like any show, if you don't have like a base understanding of who this person is that you're trying to portray, you are going to go out there and you're going to get out there, and when it's time for that person to portray what they need to portray, you're going to have
Hmm.
nothing. You're going to have
Right.
nothing because you put no thought into it.
It's so
So
true.
Pat was a very big advocate of being like one, he really loved the wrestlers that could work in the ring, but he was ahead of his time always in that he understood the storytelling aspect of a match probably better than almost anybody.
Yeah. Because even like at one point he says something like, you guys always move fast, but in this match, there's like the stakes are a little bit different. So you kind of want to move slower through the like he
Well, no,
just
yeah,
his
he was
mind is
saying he was just like
crazy.
he's like you have a tendency like to go fast. He's like that's when you're gonna miss a punch. You're gonna what? He's like take your time, and it's the same thing like they tell you when you're on doing like stage productions and things. You will
Mm.
have a tendency to speed up, but what ends up happening is you are no longer intelligible to the audience. So it's like one of those things.
Mm.
It's the same
Mm-hmm.
kind of like concept where it's just like you are excited because you're out there in front of people and blah 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 blah, but you if you rush through it the sequence, they miss the sequence, and if you
Right,
can't
right, right.
communicate what the sequence is, you didn't do your job. So
That's yeah.
yeah,
And doing it, having to do it with your body.
right,
Again, seems obvious, but like a play, you're speaking things so you can just slow down and
right,
articulate, whatever. But like having to communicate that with your body while also trying to communicate with another person who's doing it with their body,
right.
crazy.
And to the person in the back of the arena, like
Right. And
to
to
the
the
guy
ref, so they
who bought the
understand.
yeah to
Yeah.
who bought the nosebleed ticket, like he has to feel like he got his money's worth too, like,
So
and
true.
that's crazy.
And the commentators have to be able to understand what moves it. It really is wild. It really is
Hmm.
wild. I will fist fight anyone who says this is fake swear. Like this
I,
is
I get it.
it's whatever. So anyway, in 1996, Paul obviously or Paul LOL Pat so
LOL. The way
sorry.
we want to talk about Paul Heyman at all times.
Swear anyway. So in 1996, obviously for Pat's many contributions to the wrestling business, he is inducted into the Hall of Fame. And this is a really beautiful moment because he publicly shares the award with his longtime partner, Louis, who
Hmm.
is there,
Yeah.
which love. Again, he says dear friend, but we know
Nah,
obviously
he also he
that
goes in like for he's like he's been a dear friend, a companion, like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So
Um,
I just thought that was so special. Again, because
so
where
special.
this is 1996, where Goldust is getting slammed for even remotely having an iota of the suggestion of homosexuality. Like,
Right. That is so true. Wow,
so
that's actually crazy
so
now that
at
you
the
say that.
same time that that is going on, like publicly, for him to just kind of acknowledge somebody that has supported his entire career and I'm sure also had to take a lot of uh hiding, navigating, skirting, like through all because he was with Pat his whole career. So
Yeah.
just as Pat was, navigating those spaces, he was also navigating those spaces. So to not be able to like receive your accolades without acknowledging that is it like that's important. Like you need
Mm-hmm.
like especially considering just the context of the relationship. It just didn't happen. So,
Yeah.
cool.
So true. Um, but then very unfortunately, just 2 years later, Louis drops dead of a heart attack. It was the day of King of the Ring. So Pat is obviously working, busy. Louis decides to fly home to visit his family, and they call Pat and say that he just dropped
Hmm.
dead, which is horrifying and very scary. Like just that could
Yeah.
happen. I don't
Hmm.
know. It's one of those things where it's just like, oh my God, like we are
What?
just
You're
in a
right.
flesh prison and it could all end at any time. Really crazy.
Yeah.
Um, but he says, Pat says, without Louis, I don't think I would be here. I would have never made it as far as I did. They were together for 40 years.
Yeah.
And I mean, even just thinking about the beginning of their relationship and how he just dropped everything and Louis dropped everything to follow him to Portland is just and has been with him this whole time through all of
Hmm.
this. Like it's just beyond. And it's very bittersweet to have that moment at the Hall of Fame induction and then just 2 years later, like to have that person gone. It's like you're grateful you said it, but it's so sad. It was like right before this person passed.
Hmm.
But he says everyone showed out for Louis' funeral. There were so many people there that the police were like, that must have been somebody famous. We've never had this many people for a funeral. Um, And a lot of like the wrestlers who were in this documentary say like really beautiful things about Louis. He was very sweet, very nice. Like he was always like a stand-up guy, always had so much fun with him. Um, and this nearly killed me. Because they I guess show something to Pat and you don't see it right away. And Pat says, like, oh God, you're really trying to make me cry, but like I don't want to cry. I've done that enough. And they show a picture of a fan club certificate for the Pat Patterson fan club, like signed by Louis. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
like I certify that like Louis, I forget his last name. It's like done. It's something with a D.
Hold
Um,
on. I had it. Where was it?
it's like Dundero or
Dundero. Yeah.
Dundero. Okay. Um, I certify that Louis Dundero is a part of the Pat Patterson International Fan Club. Like that is so cute. Like if that's not the energy, I don't want it. If you're not a part of my fan club, don't be
Mm-hmm.
here. That's crazy. That's so sweet.
I love that. Yeah. The
Um,
so cute.
yeah. So then they transition into talking about the quote unquote Mr. McMahon character, which I have yet to see in real life. Um, and how Pat and Jerry were his stooges.
Yes.
So Vin says there was many times I didn't know what I was gonna do or say, but they were so good. They knew how to react. They were great at improvising.
Yeah. Hey, honestly, it was just a ridiculously silly time period. Like
it just felt very improv, like
it's very
improv.
backstage segments. It's very like just like slapstick comedy, very that sort of thing.
Yeah. Um, and Edge says, he was one of the best minds in the business and he understood that this was just entertainment. Because they had Pat Patterson, who is this like incredibly lauded wrestler. He was the very first Intercontinental Champion. He's doing the
Right.
most insane, ridiculous stuff, like for fun. Like
Yeah.
for the ha ha he he. Like
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
just to be the guy that like slips and falls and face first into a pie or something.
Right.
Like just
Yeah.
it's very slapsticky.
Mm-hmm.
Um and Pat says, being a stooge, well, it was fun, but sometimes inside I was like, why the hell am I doing this? Like, I am a professional wrestler. But it worked. Like,
Right.
it worked. And they have this like moment where like Pat like dumps champagne all over Jerry, and then like it's like he smashes the champagne bottle over his head, pins him, and like runs away.
Yes, that is with the inception of the hardcore championship. The we'll get into it, but the one of the stipulations of that is that the hardcore championship was on the line 24/7. Anybody
Work.
if
Okay, I
you
love that.
you got,
Ooh,
and
I
that's
love
you
that.
saw Pat Patterson getting Jerry. So yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
kind of obsessed with that idea.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so then after a while of doing that, Pat announces his retirement from the business in 2004 after 46 years in the business. He says, I was really burnt out. There were new guys coming in with new opinions, and I was happy he did that, meaning Vince, and that I just didn't fit in anymore. And the way he says it though, and I really have to take a page out of this book where he's like, and I didn't fit in anymore. Like where it's just like it's actually okay to outgrow things and not feel like
Bad about it. Like it's
right,
fine.
and
Like
like
I
try and continue to wedge yourself in. He was
right.
like, he literally goes, I was happy he did it because I didn't fit in anymore. And now I had like the ability to leave
Right.
because of that. Like I had the space to leave because I could feel I didn't mesh here anymore.
Right. Like it wasn't
Um,
just gonna be me and Vince like with a pencil. Like it's
and the
there's
book,
other
yeah.
people, there's a bigger corporation. It's a whole thing now. He's like, I don't need to be there. Like I don't have to like do this. So
Yes. And he says he was sad just because thinking it was like, it was the thing he liked the most and he didn't know what he was going to do now. And they asked him if he wanted to be in the Legends house, which I know nothing about
so
this.
the Legends House was a reality show that came about with the inception of the WWE network. It was like one of their like premiere like shows to try and like get people to like watch. So it's essentially like Big Brother, but just with, like wrestlers, I guess.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
they had like the most random assortment of people. They're not that I didn't love it. It was like
yeah.
Gene Okerlund, Hillbilly Jim. Like it
Roddy
was,
Piper.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was
yeah.
like a random sort of people, but That is really funny. I was like, is this a reality show? And I decided not to look it up because I wanted you to explain it to me. But
Yeah, it's a reality show. It was like one of the first like original shows that they put on the network when they came out with the WWE network.
that is so funny.
Mm-hmm.
And Pat's like, I did not want to do that. He goes,
Yeah.
but Vince McMahon really knows how to con people.
Yeah.
Famous last words.
No,
Um,
honestly.
but Jimmy Hart says, we had a great time at the Legends house. We spent 13 weeks together, and that is a long time to spend with somebody,
Yeah.
living in the same place. Gene Okerlund said, because they were both older at that point. I'm not sure how
Yeah.
old they were, but Gene Okerlund wasn't a young a
Spring
spry young
chicken.
hen,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
at
yeah.
the time. But he said I would not have made it through without Pat. This guy, he loved life. He was always happy. This was also great too. I hope they say this about me someday. He enjoyed the people around him, otherwise they weren't around him.
Same. Same, honestly.
Amen. Energy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the last night of the Legends house, or the last night at the Legends house, they're having dinner. And this is when Pat finally decides to come out publicly. Like straight up, I am gay. I am
Right.
gay and I survived all these
Mm-hmm.
years in the wrestling business. And it's like this huge moment. Like he cries, everyone cries, they cheers to it. He's like, I've never said this publicly before. I This is wild to me because like we said, like he wasn't necessarily hiding, but he wasn't like, here it is.
Mm-hmm.
This was 4 years before he died.
What?
Like when
2000, he doesn't die till 2020.
oh wait, no. Wait. Was it 6 years? Wait, hold on. Sorry. I looked this up and I thought it was like a very short amount of time before he died. Like when Legends House was.
Mm-mm.
I probably just did my math wrong. Sorry, sorry,
He
sorry.
died in 2020.
No, I know, but the last episode of Legends House.
I
Oh, it was 6 years before he
2014.
died.
Yeah.
6 years before he died. Okay,
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
sorry.
No, you're good. I just wasn't. I was like 2004. No, that doesn't sound right. But
My bad.
yeah. No, you're good.
Okay, I will go back. Um, but this was 6 years before he died,
Yeah.
which is crazy. I mean,
Hmm.
literally 6 years before he died is when he felt comfortable enough. And I'm not saying like he should have done it sooner. It's not that. I'm just saying like that's a wild thing to like do and feel you have to do even
Hmm.
at the age that you're at. Now, obviously he doesn't know when he's
Right.
going to pass, but like he's an older man. It's not necessarily a secret, but he says like I said before, it always felt like being gay was chasing me and I always hoped one day that that would go away. And he means like the feeling of being chased.
Hmm.
Um and now it is, and it's a great feeling.
Hmm. He says, "Now I say it. I'm
Now
free."
I say it, like you all knew, but now I said it.
Right.
And I think that is a very, and this is obvious, but it's a very important distinction.
Yes, it is, and it is a very it's in a very important just kind of step most queer people make in that it's kind of just like being different, you open yourself up to a lot of just kind of ridicule. A lot of it is just not in your hands. A lot of the conversation has nothing to do with you. That people like to throw in their 2 cents, give their, their piece. Um, but there is something uniquely powerful about being like, no, that is, yeah, this is who I am. And now I
Mm-hmm.
say it. Now I'm the one who's telling you who I am, not you all telling me who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And because when you are different, like everyone likes to tell you who you are, how you should be, how to act. Um, but there is something very, very powerful and very, um, or I view as necessary in being like, no, I am my own person. I'm going to tell you who I am,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can do with that information what you want. You
Mm-hmm.
do not get to have that power over me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the generation he comes from probably informs a lot of why this took so long.
Right. That's what I was gonna say. Like, and I'm gonna do it when I want to on my timeline. And I don't feel, and this could be wrong, but I don't feel like he should have felt the need. Like, I don't know how I want to say this. Like, he shouldn't have to even do this like huge declaration. And like, I
No.
understand why it's important, but the only reason anyone should ever feel that they need to say it is because they feel they need to say it for themselves.
Right.
And so even if it's when he's in his 70s and he finally feels the need to say it,
Right.
that's his business. Like
Right.
that's his timeline, that's how he wanted, like he lived his life the way that he wanted to live his life, and like you said, maybe there was another time he wanted to be more public about it, but because of the generation he grew up in he couldn't. But it's like your timeline, you don't owe people the explanation of
Mhm.
saying something like that because they're already saying it about you.
Right.
So it's like perfect timeline regardless of when you say it and why.
Mhm. No, yeah,
um
absolutely.
but Vince says, Pat, well, we already knew, but for him to be able to say it for himself must have been a huge weight off his shoulders. Bruce says Pat's homosexuality was the worst kept secret in the wrestling business, but it was good for him to like finally get it off his chest and just be
Mhm.
free. Um, and then they talk about how, Pat Patterson never really retired. Vince was like, come to work whenever you want. Like, you can come and offer your 2 cents whenever. Bruce said he would watch the program at home and had very strong opinions about it and was not shy about coming in to share them.
Love that.
Um, Dolph Ziggler says Pat would come in and be like, I saw you last week and it was terrible. It was
Yeah.
awful. And he'd be like, dang it. Like he goes, but then we would hash it out. Because he just wanted the best possible wrestling show there could be.
Mhm.
And I love that. I love the expostulations, the
Mhm.
just like the blunt honesty, but we're gonna work on it. I'm not gonna tell you suck and then not help you. Like we're
Right.
gonna figure it out.
Right,
Like,
right, right.
Michael Hayes, better known as Doc, says everyone always looks forward to when Pat is around and he always has something to teach you. Um, Pat says, I love this business. It's a beautiful business to be in. And then a bunch of the wrestlers say, you could just always tell he just loves it. He's enjoying himself. He's having a great time. He is happy to be there. And that's when Pat talks about how he goes into the crowd before shows to feel the energy. And he says, I just love wrestling fans. I can't thank them enough. They love what I love, and I love them all.
Yeah.
And then on December 2nd, 2020, Pat passes away at the age of 79. Bruce Pritchard says, for the business, there's a huge hole because there's nobody like Pat Patterson, and there never will be. Um, and every wrestler says he was very helpful to the younger generation. He was very open about sharing. Obviously, we know this, he was training them, but
Mhm.
he was very willing to teach. He was a
Yeah.
great teacher. Um, and Vince says basically says there isn't a tombstone big enough to commemorate all of the accolades and all of the
Mhm.
things that he did for everybody here.
Yeah.
Um,
And you can tell like during that the bell salute, like Vince was like Vince is like not an emotive
no,
dude, but
nope.
he was like having a hard time holding it together.
Yes. And because even during Pat's retirement thing, he literally at one point, Vince is like, okay, stop hugging me. Like,
Yeah.
sir,
Not
calm
not
down.
not a not a feeler,
He's not, he doesn't have
not a
time.
feelings person. Yeah.
The devil is at his heels. He doesn't have
Right.
time. Um, but that also it really, we were living in such a weird void with COVID and like obvious, so it was like a virtual, like obviously the wrestlers got to be there
Yeah.
and whatever, but like the audience was just like virtual. It was
Yeah.
just like such a weird, it's so weird to look back at that time, but also at the same time I feel like sometimes it's nice to not have the crowd. Like it's like obviously you want people to, right, okay, so
I was
like
like,
I'm
wait
not
a minute,
crazy, right?
what? No,
Like
at a
like
wrestling show, you want to not have a
no, no,
crowd?
no, no. Obviously, I want the crowd. Obviously, I want the crowd. I'm saying, like, for a memorial, it's like, yes, we
Oh,
can tape it and it can be live and whatever, but sometimes you just want to be with your people.
yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
they're virtual and that's beautiful, whatever, but sometimes you just want to, like, be with your people. So, I'm not saying, like, it would have been better or worse either way. I'm just saying,
Mm,
like, I kind of like, it was a weird hellscape we lived in where like we were doing like virtual reality and like obviously we did what we needed to get through so the wrestling
right.
business continued to move forward. But also like whatever, that's a whole other conversation for a whole other day. But it's just weird. It's just a
It
weird
was
thing.
weird. Very, very weird time.
But Bruce says, you know, he was a genius. Stone Cold said his biggest contribution to the business, along with the great body of work, was all the knowledge that he passed on to all of the superstars who came through those doors, myself included. Shawn Michaels says a couple guys owe their careers to Pat Patterson. I'm one of them. None of it would have been possible if it wasn't for Pat. And Bruce finishes the episode with everything you look at in the WWE. I can guarantee Pat had a hand in it. And then it closes with just chants of "Merci, Pat," from the crowd, from one of his, I think it was like a farewell episode when he was leaving, retiring.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was this episode of this documentary on Pat Patterson.
Yeah. So that
Obviously,
was a very the very complicated history of Pat Patterson. So
yeah, and you know, it's one of those things where there's so many things obviously they didn't get into, like, you know, that the steroid trials happened also in conjunction with a huge like turning point in his career. Like there's so many things that also like it's a documentary that is edited and put together and curated for a specific purpose.
right.
So, you know, we take
Take it with
everything
a
with a
grain of
grain of
salt.
salt. Yep. So I guess moving forward, we're going to see like where these allegations go, what happens, and you know, if we know more, I guess we'll at some point talk about it because I'm sure when we know more about Vince, we'll discuss it
Right.
with that trial, which I'm sure will be
Which
a
has did you
while.
see was put on hold because the FBI decided to take it over? So that's fun.
Which is really crazy. The FBI, like, they never forgave for the steroid trials. They're coming back with a vengeance.
Listen, if this is true, they need to come. Like, they need to come.
No, they absolutely do. You're so right. You're
Hmm.
so right. Something needs to happen here. I mean,
Hmm.
it's just we'll never 100% know what happened behind the closed doors, but I can guarantee you a lot of it was not good.
Right.
I like
Just too many instances, too many stories, too many lawsuits, too
and
many
just the circumstances are too
unbelievable.
yes.
Yes.
Yes. And just like the power dynamic, everything. You guys
Hmm.
all know. I mean, and so I'm assuming we'll give you updates when we know more, but like I said, or like Xavier said, things are on hold and we'll discuss when we are able to discuss.
Yep, sounds good.
But
All right, so that has been this episode of the New to Wrestling podcast After Dark. Look out for so this comes out on Saturday. So look out for our next episode of just New to Wrestling podcast. We're continuing our trek through the Attitude Era, and then look out for next week. We're gonna watch the Iron Man match. We're gonna talk about it between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart at WrestleMania 12 because it is a
very exciting.
doozy, and I feel an integral part of wrestling education. So yeah.
For sure.
Thank you as always wherever you catch us. Thank you for liking, comment, subscribing, and we will see you next time.
I'll see you there.